Hey, welcome to the Curious Native Podcast. I'm your host, Matoaka, and in today's episode, we will be continuing our discussion from the last episode, relating to Native Americans in film, specifically of the historic figure Pocahontas. Today we'll be going through, specifically historic events, year by year, and how they played out, and how the movie, misconstrued it and completely fabricated events, and, all in the name of money. So, before we get into the actual episode, I do think I need to just, if you hear little noises in the background, it is raining. There's just going to be noises, so I apologize for that. I'm trying my best to, muffle it. There's literal cardboard around the mic right now, so just, if the episode sounds a little bit off, I know at least you can understand. At least there's that. Okay. And another thing before we get into the episode, I think we need to have a little recap. So, if you did not listen to the last episode, which you should, I think the best course to go on, is the little recap. So, for starters, John Smith met the Powhatan people when he was 27. Pocahontas was 9 or 10. So, let's just get that out of the bat that they were not in love. No matter how much John Smith tries to say so in his personal journals. Pocahontas most likely never saved John Smith. In the movie depicting where she throws her body over him so he doesn't, get smashed, doesn't get his head smashed. We explained the circumstances in the last episode on why she wouldn't have been there, but short story start. Children would not have been, present during that execution. They were not gonna subjugate the children to, viewing that. So I doubt that, even happened at all. It most likely was just completely a lie. And lastly, Pocahontas married a man in her tribe in 1610, Kt.2, and had her first child. And that's where we left off on the last episode. So let's get into this. Pocahontas got married in 1610 and had her first child. There actually isn't much known about Kt.2, the man she married, considering the Powhatan people did not keep written records. But according to the Jamestown's records, which, you should take with a grain of salt, Pocahontas and Kt.2 were married in 1610. There's actually isn't much known about what happened to Kt.2, but it's likely he either died in battle or they divorced, which isn't uncommon based on, the Powhatan cultures, traditions, and practices. As you can see, this is a vastly different, tale than what the film depicts. For starters, John Smith and Pocahontas didn't end up together. Kt.2 did not die by the hands of that loser British Thomas guy. He did not die by, at least, the hands of a Thomas. And I think those are one of the things that I think bother me the most. Like, not only are you, exploiting and, appropriating this child's image, for your own gain, but then you're going to go even further and, literally kill people, depict the murdering of, people within that tribe, even more so, especially when that specific murder didn't happen. People, they were murdering them in that tribe, but Kt.2 was not murdered by Thomas. Let's get that out of the way. I do have to issue a trigger warning before we do get into the next part, because kidnapping and child sexual assault will be mentioned. Of course, I'm not going to be going into discussing details or really any details at all of that. It will be brushed upon lightly. It should not be ignored, but also at the same time, we do not need to, go all true crime mode and, overdo it with, the disgustingly, the disgusting way that, true crime podcasters describe murders and, assaults on people. So just warning that that's not going to happen here. I just think it's a fair warning that, that will be brushed upon at least. In the year 1613, Captain Argyle kidnapped Pocahontas and her child for the, quote unquote, the ransoming of Englishmen that were prisoners, and to get arms and tools and some quantities of corn, which, I need to mention that not only did they kidnap Pocahontas and her child, they took her child away from her to use as leverage. Pocahontas was kidnapped by Captain Samuel Argyle. Her husband was murdered, and she was forced to give up her first child in hopes to give the colonists an upper hand on the Native Americans and to prevent the tribe from attacking. See, this is from learningincommon.org. You go around and there's going to be different descriptions of events, which is why, I tried my best to piece together at least a cohesive timeline. But like I said, I'm going to have a bunch of resources in the comments, so you could go through it and, come to, whatever conclusion you come to. I'm not going to tell you what to think, but it is interesting when you get down to it that, we don't really know a lot, which is, that sentiment's going to be even more so, at the end of this episode, you're going to feel that even more so. While Pocahontas was being held captive, she was raped and later gave birth to her second child, which is what I needed to give that trigger warning for. On April 16th, 1614, John Rolfe and Pocahontas were married. She was forced to convert to Christianity and to change her name to Rebecca. In 1616, the Rolfer traveled back to England, in which Pocahontas and a dozen Powhatan men and women went as well. They were forced to go. It's not like they had a choice. In March 1617, before the Rolfes were getting ready to go back to Virginia, Pocahontas fell seriously ill and died. Now, the way she died isn't quite clear, since there are conflicting reports. Like I said, I just read a conflicting report. I said freaking 4 minutes before that we aren't quite sure what happened to Cocoon. But then, I read on here out loud, it said that, they killed her husband and kidnapped Pocahontas, which, conflicting reports. You're going to be digging through, Jamestown records and going to, different academia websites. You're going to get so many different things, and you're going to have to just be prepared for that. Since there are conflicting reports, one report says, after traveling down to Thames River, she got sick, which she was taken ashore, later dying in the town of Gravesend. Another report says she fell deathly ill after eating dinner, to which she later died. And, it's honestly really heartbreaking that we can't get a clear answer on how this indigenous girl, died and what was the exact cause of her death. A lot of people think, oh, maybe, she caught sickness, she couldn't handle it. She was in England for less than a year when she died. I think, she got there, let me see. (1616), around the end of 1616. So it would have been November, maybe October, they went back. And then in March 1617, literally less than a year, she dies. Another, the one thing we do know, though, for sure, is she died in Gravesend. Well, after explaining that, you can see, after explaining all that, you could see clearly what is wrong with Pocahontas 1995 and Pocahontas 2 Journey to a New World. Disney turned the original MMIWG2 Spirit story into a love story, which isn't only, negligent and irresponsible for a multi-billion-dollar company to do. It's just straight up disgusting. Like, this is a child who is raped and kidnapped and taken from her family to a whole nother continent. And you made her story into a love story, Disney. Really. Pocahontas and John Smith did not fall in love. She didn't save him, and she most certainly didn't travel to England willfully. Her story is one of victimhood, not of romance. And I'm going to leave the episode at that. I know it was a lot less, going through through the movies, like I said, but I think, once I laid out the, story, once I laid out a timeline of events, you don't necessarily even have to explain the movie, because it's like, well, there's no comparison. What am I going to compare? Her talking to the tree? Like, Jesus Christ, that's, don't get me wrong, as natives, we totally believe in animism. I can only speak for my tribe, at least. We definitely believe in animism, and, the idea of a talking tree, grandma willow tree, that's, that's nice and all, but that's not part of her story. There's no little raccoon, none of this. She was a child who unfortunately fell victim to colonialism and colonization, which, ultimately took her life. But yeah, I want to say, thank you for listening to this. This was a 2-part episode that, it took a lot of work and research just to do. And it was a lot. It was really gross just to, sit down, do the research, read over all these things. A lot of nasty stuff did come up, like a lot of stupid artwork, a lot of gross details that, like I said, I wasn't going to go into details, and nor am I going to link anything that has those type of details, because those type of details do not matter. We do not need to know, how she was, exactly how she was sexually assaulted. She was a kid. We don't need to know that. End of discussion. All we need to know, she was assaulted, and she was a victim of that, which led to her getting pregnant, and then being married off to, a colonizer, and then sent off to England, to where she died. Anyways, thank you for listening to this episode. Follow me on Twitter at Huskusman at the end. Follow the official podcast Twitter page at TCN Pod. You can also follow the Hetwe Hutya Safe Space Community official Twitter page. I host multiple spaces on multiple platforms, specifically Reddit and Discord. So, all that's on my social media if you want to go ahead and look into that. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.